Sunday marks 3 years since the tragedy at Mother Emanuel AME Church here in downtown Charleston. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with the church's historian and lifelong member, Liz Alston, one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores, or listen to this interview later on the free iHeartRadio app. Liz Alston.
Hello, Quintin.
It's so good to see you again.
And it's better to see you.
Always. You know, I saw you a week ago. You were on a tour with Mr. Godfrey.
Right. You know, being on the tour guide commission.
Right.
Tourism commission. I guess I keep an even template with so many people. And the city of Charleston and tours and keeping up with this rapid growth that we're going, all that's part of my repertoire.
There you go. Let me talk more about history.
Okay.
Obviously tomorrow is 3 years since the tragedy took place at your church, Mother Emanuel. And I know they're having a couple of events that is for the next couple of days, from the church service tomorrow to the grand finale next Sunday. Let me go to the church service. When you sit down tomorrow and you hear Reverend Manning speak, what do you think the sermon should be?
Well, Manning is not going to speak tomorrow. It's the
That's right.
Watley,
Right.
who's from Reed, in Maryland,
yeah.
will speak. And I wondered about that. I cannot wait to sit in my seat to see how a minister would deal with a tragedy 3 years. You know, you're talking about 365 times 3. Yeah. And with all of the things that has been happening, not only at Emanuel, the shooting, and I'm thinking about, you know, what text he's going to use. And not only have there been church shootings, but there have been shootings in schools, there have been shootings in malls, there have been shootings in parks, there have been shootings at concerts. So it's kind of interesting because the Parkland survivors from Parkland, Florida, is going to be at Emanuel one day to talk to the survivors. So the whole country is caught up in this craziness that's going on. And at Mother Emanuel, the service would be very interesting. Maybe 6 months from now, we'll come back and I'll analyze that sermon. Sure. Because I usually take notes. But tomorrow's service will be quite interesting. 3 years, all of the things that have been happening. 3 years since Obama came to speak at Reverend Pinckney's funeral.
Right.
Because that was June 29th, so
right.
It's there. How the families have fared, which means that many of them have not come back to Mother Emanuel because of the scar. How many of the survivors have been around the world. Some of them have been invited by Bishop Tutu.
Right.
And many of them have been getting a lot of awards. So I'm watching very closely to see how the impact of the shooting, not only have it impacted the church congregation,
right.
the families, the survivors, the community as well, and around the nation, a lot of the commentators are talking about Emanuel. Tonight I'll watch my news, tomorrow to see how it is. And as an historian, I am recording my thoughts. And by the way, looking for a publisher to publish these 1,200 or so more days of remembrance that I've done. And as one individual, I sometimes do not like to use myself as a personal example, but sometimes I do. And to say, what would I say to Susie Jackson, who would have been 91?
Right.
Or sometimes I think about Myra Thompson and her husband who is on the forefront, or her daughter, or sometimes Tawanza Sanders, and his mother and how she's coping. Sometimes I go to churches and the survivors are there, and everybody knows that I'm a member of Emanuel, so I'm often asked to share my thoughts on these things. So the thoughts are just wandering, and I'm also wondering, how I feel today on the 16th,
Right.
but how will I really feel on the 17th? I'm wondering that as well.
And let me go fast forward to Wednesday. Obviously, they will have a community Bible study at the church. What is that ideal scripture passage that you would like for them to go to, talking about the remembrance of this tragedy?
Yeah, Mark 4, and I think Myra Thompson, who became licensed that night, was talking about that. And that is whether or not that scripture will be brought out. A lot of people talk about it.
Right.
I have not heard any minister go into the details about it, but that would be interesting. When I talked about earlier, the scripture, whether it would deal with what they did on the Bible study. And talking about the Bible study, which is held every Wednesday, that has not been a full service, because sometimes on an average of 12 people attended every year. So maybe the Bible study that the incident occurred has maybe had a lasting effect on many of the people.
And I know right after that, they'll have an interactive session that is with a lot of the students. How should those students interact with your community at Mother Emanuel?
What students are you talking about?
Oh, high school students and whatnot.
Oh, yesterday I had a tour, and sometimes students come to Emanuel to visit the church. I have found the students, regardless of race or age, many of them are very respectful. I find no difference in the students. They have the same questions about the church.
Right.
They come to the church and they listen very intently to the history. Many of the questions concern the shooter. Many of them want to know, where were you? Were you there at the area? Yesterday we had a group from Savannah.
Oh yeah.
Many of the questions that were asked were about security. Most people want to know, how has it affected the membership? How has it affected security?
Right.
Do people still come to the church at night? These are universal questions regardless of race. And so you talk about students, and I talked about this quite often. I think it was a group of students from Kennesaw, Georgia.
Oh yeah.
They had an urn, and the students were asked to put into the urn what do they think is the most prevalent problem in America. And they burned their answers and put it in an urn.
Right.
And in the second urn, they were asked, what is your solution? No one knew what it was, but they presented it to me, and that urn is still at the church because I want to make sure that it never leaves the doors of the church. And it is an instant reminder of the students who come to our doors to talk about their feelings. And I usually talk to them about making themselves a committee of one to repel bigotry, racism, and even though I'm not asking them to be brave warriors, but if those things come to their thoughts, contact an older person, a teacher, a minister, a counselor, and maybe a policeman, or an older cousin or family member, so that they would not be put on the forefront by dealing with the racist things that's going on.
And obviously next Saturday they'll have the rally, the Unity rally for Unity, that is. And I know Jamal Bryan from Baltimore is coming, Dot Scott speaking, you got Reverend Hal from St. Michael's, a slew of other people. What would be their message to the world right now?
I think reconciliation. That's the first word that comes to my mind. And there are a lot of churches like Grace Episcopal
Right.
Church. Every Tuesday they had book study,
Right.
and often in their minds of what's going to happen, like what happens at Emmanuel.
Right.
So the Unity Rally, I think on 23rd next Saturday, is it with Joan Beard
Right.
coming here. And it will be interesting. At 8:30 I'll be on the front line
Right.
seeing what is going to happen, to see how many people show up, the support that has been pouring on. And of course at Emmanuel it has been overwhelming. The tremendous amount of support that comes to the church. Every Sunday morning, even though the church is limited to, can hold 2,500 people,
Right.
we're limited to 1,000. And so there are hundreds of people out, even in talking yesterday at the church. And I looked at the programs that were being
Right.
run off, and we expect around 600 to 700 people.
Wow.
So, and every Sunday, the church is filled with visitors, and people just want to come. And I'm around the church almost a lot,
Right.
and in front of the church, people are always taking pictures,
Right.
and in front of the church. So it has been 3 years of humility on my part, of remembering the victims and the Emanuel 9, and hoping that a better world will result, not only in the world, but among the congregation, among the families, the people that had Emmanuel. So we need prayer too.
You talk about numbers and years, and I thought about the whole collection that you all have for the Mother Emanuel remembrance, that is. Where are we with that right now?
Well, yes, we still have it. As chairperson of the memorabilia committee, I was up there yesterday because people are still giving.
Wow.
My car is usually filled with paintings, and we hold it. We have those things, and hopefully a museum could be developed so that we can display those items. But I would be remiss if I didn't thank Mayor Riley,
Sure.
former Mayor Riley, present Mayor Tecklenburg, and the Catholic Diocese and County Council, who provide space for the storage of the memorabilia, and the memorabilia committee, which consists of archivists and young professionals
Right.
from the city of Charleston,
Right.
the National Trust, the South Carolina Historical Society, the Preservation Society, Yorktown,
Oh, yeah.
George McDaniel, and people at Drayton Hall.
Right.
All of these people have come to aid Emmanuel in keeping the memorabilia by cataloging and at the same time archiving the material so that posterity will have a glimpse of what has happened over for the last 3 years.
And I got a few minutes here. I want to talk to you about some developing news. Obviously, Charleston City Council member William Dudley Gregory wants the city of Charleston to apologize about slavery that happened a couple of years ago. Where are you with this discussion?
Well, some of my friends who are not African Americans called. I spoke to one of them today, and a lot of the whites who feel that they did not have a role in slavery, and some of them feel, well, why should I apologize? So I said, well, who else is going to apologize? I thought I just came back from Africa.
Right.
And it's very vivid in my mind, the slave trade, the Middle Passage, the enslavement of African Americans for almost 200 years.
Right.
Somebody has to apologize to me, to my ancestors who were slaves. I had no part in it, but I feel the brunt of it. So, for I can say to young white Americans, older white Americans. It was your grandfathers or your great-grandfathers or your neighbors who benefited from slavery. They have the fine houses and all of the benefits are still coming in until maybe some of them are able to give up their houses or their ancestors that are going on. Since they can't apologize, then we're not asking individuals, we're not asking for individual apology,
Right.
but for institutional apology. And who best by a city council, and they have done it all over the country. So Charleston also was the recipient because 40% of the slaves came through here.
Right.
So Charleston, apologize.
Liz Alston, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
I have enjoyed, and I'm not short on giving my opinions, and I thank you for the opportunity to do so, so that even whether or not you agree with me, it would at least open your thought processes so that you may look at history from a different perspective.
I'm here to give you a platform to speak.
Thank you, Quintin.
You're welcome.